Hello again, Nightmare Society. As per usual, I have a few creepy stories to tell you this evening. I hope you enjoy. Thanks to user lookingideal and user JonathanKerner for sharing their stories with us tonight, the last one being anonymous. I'd like to say hello to Sammy on Podbean, yesii on Podbean, xxy.lily, and leannhellx. Thanks for listening, guys. As per usual, let's all give a big round of applause to our producers for this week's episode. Danielle, Ginger, Mike to the D, Cat OJ, Devin, Savannah, Pixel Donut, Janelle, Michelle, Diane, and Joy, our newest member. Welcome to the club, Joy. Thank you guys for keeping the fire going at the Nightmare Society official members Campfire. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can visit patreon.com/Nightmare Society. Now, get comfy and prepare yourself for another episode of the Nightmare Society. This story happened when I was 15 years old and on a school trip in San Francisco. At the time, I was very immature. Not in the sense you'd normally think, but in the sense that I didn't really know how the world worked and how scary it could be. I attribute this story and a few other scary things that happened in the past year to me growing up and realizing how the world really works. I was rooming with two other girls in my room, both who were a year older than me, so I didn't really know them well. The way our trip worked, so to say, was that breakfast was in the hotel. It was between 7 to 8, but the chaperones on the trip wouldn't wake us up. So if we wanted to have time to get ready and eat before we left to explore the city for the day, we had to do it on our own. This meant that in the morning, me and the people in my room didn't see the chaperones until we all went down for breakfast, usually around 7:45 a.m. However, this day was different. We were tired of arriving late and having to eat quickly, so we woke up a bit earlier to go down for breakfast right when it opened. We ate breakfast with pretty much the rest of the kids on my trip and all headed to the elevator together. This was a mixed boys-girls trip, and my twin brother also happened to be on the trip. So the people in the elevator was him and his friends, me and the girls from my room, and a few of their friends. The elevator door was almost closed when two men stuck their hand through the door and stepped inside. Squeezing themselves into an already packed elevator. They looked young, maybe 19 or 20. Eventually, we arrived at our floor and all got off. So did the men. The way the hotel rooms and hallways were situated was essentially just a square. You could go any way around the floor and eventually make it back to the elevator if you turned left or right 3 times. The people on my trip went right, and the men went left. Eventually, my brother and his friends trickled off into their rooms, and it was just me and one of the girls on my trip. The other one had gone to one of the boys' rooms. We were right at our rooms when we encountered the men again. At first, we didn't notice anything wrong. They were probably just trying to find their room. I turned away from them and tried to find my room key and my wallet. Now at this point, my immature brain didn't notice anything wrong, but my roommate did. I could see the panic in her eyes, and as I turned to look at the men, I realized they weren't looking for a room. They were looking for us. My heart began to race and we panicked, each fumbling for our room cards to get into our room as quick as possible. But the men were moving towards us too quickly. We were standing there, pressed against our door, as these two men stepped closer to us and got within half a foot of our faces. Their English wasn't the best, so they slowly asked us what we were doing. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to do in this situation, so my roommate spoke up. She tried her best not to let them know that this was our room, but it was obvious at this point. She stuttered something about trying to get into our friend's room, but these men clearly weren't there to know what we were doing. I could tell they were there for something more sinister. One of the men continued to stare at me and eye me up and down while the other guy got really close to my roommate and asked her for her number. She stood up taller and quickly said,
No, I'm sorry, you can't.
But her voice trailed off as her confidence wore off. At last I spoke, explaining to them that we were underage and that we were on a school trip, that we could not. They didn't take no for an answer. At that point, I slowly started to pull my room key from my wallet. Luckily, my friend pushed the card back into my wallet and made me push my hand holding my wallet behind my back. At the time, I was confused why she didn't let us go into the room, but now I realize she had more intuition about these men than I did. She knew that if we opened our room door with them right there, they'd likely force themselves in there with us, and who knows what would happen. Eventually, they backed off enough where we felt we could escape from them. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me along the hallway as we sprinted towards the elevator. Along the way, we ran into my brother and one of his friends. We quickly explained to them what happened, and they sprinted with us to the elevators. Once we were there, quickly pressing the elevator buttons to get downstairs where our chaperones were, we encountered the men again. I clutched onto my brother's arm, and my roommate did the same thing with my brother's friend's arm. They just stood on the other side of the hallway, staring at us, and quickly walking towards us. It looked like they were pretending to be just normal hotel patrons in front of the boys, but we knew that they weren't just normal patrons. They were creepy, and we were not risking it. Finally, the elevator door opened, and I don't think I've ever clicked close door button so fast. Right as the men got to the elevators, the door closed. Thank God. We thought our ordeal was over, but it wasn't. There were multiple elevators in the hotel. My brother, his friend, my roommate, and me had just gotten onto the breakfast hall where most of our group and chaperones were, when we realized the men were there too. They had followed us. They started off staying across the room from us, but were getting closer. We left the room and went back up to our rooms. Once there, my roommate and I were panicking. They knew where our room was. They knew our floor. They could find us at any time, and we didn't know what they would do. Our panic was cut short when the phone in our room rang. At this hotel, you could call other people's rooms, and we thought it was from one of the boys' rooms playing a joke on us. We were wrong. When we picked up the phone, it was just heavy breathing and quiet laughing. We hung up after about 20 seconds. I called my brother and his friend and asked them to meet us outside our room. They walked us to the elevators and back downstairs. On the way, we told them about the phone call. My brother's friend took responsibility for it. My roommate believed him, but I didn't. I knew they wouldn't freak us out like that. They were just trying to calm us down. Once downstairs again, still shaking, we told one of our chaperones about the two men, and they freaked out. We told the front desk about the men, but since we didn't know what room they were in or their names, they told us they couldn't do anything about it. They tried to reassure us that there was a group staying there that they were a part of, and that they were probably leaving in a few days. It didn't calm us down, though. Thankfully, we never saw them again, and I never want to. So, creepy men in the hotel, let's not meet again. So I never thought to post this here until I recently brought it up with my friend who was with me the day it happened. About a year and a half ago, my buddy and I were driving down a road near the back of this botanical garden park type area. It was fairly late, like 10 o'clock or so. He was driving, and we were essentially driving alongside the end part of the park with some woods. There's this big black gate that they lock up after dark that leads to a long stretch of road going through the middle of the park. As we drove closer to the back gate, which is in the middle of the stretch of the road running alongside the woods, we saw a few dudes hanging out by the gate. It was strange. One guy was shirtless and had a man bun, and was hanging off of the gate kind of like a monkey. The other guy was standing out on the sidewalk, looking down at us, and began to wave us down. Us being considerate and living in the neighborly, relatively friendly, yet drug-addled suburb of Staten Island, New York City, we pulled over. Something did seem definitely off, but we were in the car and they may have needed serious help. We rolled down the window and the guy who waved us down came up to us, constantly scratching his head and looking generally disoriented. He says, "Hey, our friend got hurt and broke her knee on the other side of that gate. Can you call 911 for us or something?" My buddy and I immediately felt like something was up and began to get ready to peel off. "She hurt her knee?" asked my friend in a semi-shaky voice. We began to suspect these guys were heroin addicts, but gave them the benefit of the doubt for a little longer as the disoriented guy babbled on briefly again about his friend being hurt. But suddenly the other dude, who was still shirtless, hanging on to the fence and looking into the park, snapped his head back at us, jumped down, ran to us on all fours, and bashed his head into the side of my friend's car. He popped up casually and was speaking fast, something like,
"Yeah, man, come on, guys, we need your serious help."
Now that he was off the fence and not blocking a big portion of it, I actually bothered to look closely at the other side. There was no female or friend at all, for that matter, in sight. My friend and I, horrified, looked at each other and he zipped away. As we drove away, they kept shouting at us in a manner that sounded animalistic. So, crackheads by the back gate of one of our neighborhood parks. Let's not meet again. This happened when I was 4 years old. My memory of the events are quite vivid, as this was the closest I've ever been to possibly dying. I was at the grocery store with my mom. While she was buying groceries, she left me outside to play on one of those pretend cars that you put a quarter into, and then it moves back and forward. We lived in a really small town, so there was a feeling of trust in the community, and my mom felt safe leaving me out there by myself. 4-year-old me was having the time of her life in that car. I didn't even take notice of the man standing nearby. A skinny and rather short man, he was sporting a trench coat that nearly touched his feet. He looked like he was in his mid-30s and was already starting to bald. Once the car ride stopped, the man walked up to me. I remember him kneeling down to me, letting out a wide grin and asking,
"Hey, would you like another quarter, little lady?"
Sure, mister.
I said. He smiled and placed the quarter in my hand. He held on to my hand for quite a while. I put the quarter back in the machine and went for another ride. He was watching me the entire time. Mom was taking a little longer than expected. The car ride was over again, so the man picked me up from the ride and stood me in front of him.
"You know,"
he said,
"I have a car myself. Do you want to come for a ride with me?"
I remember being a little confused by the question. It's like I was starting to notice something was a little off.
"Don't worry,"
he assured me.
"This ride is free of charge."
He grinned again. He held out his hand and I stupidly accepted it. We started walking towards his car. It was this small, dented thing that hadn't been cleaned in years. When he opened his car door, it was accompanied by a high-pitched yell from behind me. My mom, along with the large security guard, were sprinting towards me. The man panicked, jumped in his car, and drove off immediately. I was left in the parking space by myself. My mom grabbed and hugged me. I could feel her tears running down my shoulder. I heard the security guard on his walkie-talkie requesting assistance. Unfortunately, they never found the man. Thinking back to that day 20 years ago really puts things into perspective. I was possibly 10 seconds away from being taken away, forever, never to see my mom again. The fact that this man might still be roaming the streets absolutely terrifies me. I hope no one else has gotten hurt because of him. Thanks so much for listening, guys. As I mentioned before, if you'd like to contribute to the podcast or would like to become an official member of the Nightmare Society, check out patreon.com/Nightmare Society. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Nightmare Society Radio or Twitter at Society_Radio. And feel free to send your true horror stories to nightmaresocietyradio@gmail.com. I still have a few listener submitted stories to read you guys in the coming weeks, but I'll be running out soon, so I would love to hear yours. I plan on telling one of my best friend's true horror stories here soon, and I'll probably be releasing my true horror story, at least the scariest one I have, at our members-only Campfire soon as well. So I've got plenty to come, guys. I just made my 1-year anniversary a few weeks ago. I meant to mention it, but kinda forgot, so happy birthday, Nightmare Society. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.
Sweet dreams.